Hello and welcome. You're listening to Start Again with Shaunna Lee, the place where you will be reminded that it's never too late and you're never too old to do the damn thing. So stick around if you're ready to vibe higher and be inspired to chase your dreams. Together, we will uncover your soul's truest desires. Now, if you're ready, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Listen, today we are welcoming the first guy to the show, Joseph Rockey Jr. He is a serial business creator and founder. He runs and operates Elite Business Conversations, and I am so excited to welcome you to the show today. Joe, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to be the first guy on the show. I make it something that's well and connects with all of your audience.
Listen, it's bound to attract quite a few people. Just the fact that you're here. So welcome. I'm excited to hear about your story. I know that you've done some really incredible things. So let's jump right into that. Why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about your business, but specifically how you got to be the founder of this business? Because one of the first questions I like to ask people is, how have you embraced this idea of starting again? And I suspect that's part of your story.
It is, and in some ways, it's kind of the capstone of it. So let's dive into what it is that we do at Elite Business Conversations, because I think it'll answer it with a little bit more specificity. We essentially take care of three major problems that businesses are going through. The first is that businesses will feel that pain, that fear, that anxiety that comes from not knowing when the next check or revenue statement is coming in and not knowing why the sales are, why are they plateauing, why is this a thing. At Elite Business Conversations, we alleviate that entire problem and we help fix it. The other main area that we help businesses with are those that look around and go, why am I paying these people? I don't know what they actually do. And are we actually having success, or are we falling into success? Are we making it a repeatable process, or are things just haphazardly happening? And what we do at Elite Business Conversations is we fix the culture to get from this unknown blah, which can really go in any direction, positive or negative, and turn it into something that's going to be positive and productive for every single person involved in the entity, and really give a lot of innovation as a byproduct. And the group that we probably help the most, I think is going to be most interesting to answer your question you just gave me here, is that group of business owners that just heard what I said and feel regret in their heart because they don't want to rebuild their house before they sell it. And they're at a spot where they're ready to move on to the next thing, whether it be retirement, another business, or what have you. And they're willing to just let this business just go away. And I'm not saying that you don't deserve to move on, to retire, etc. But let's do it in a way where your business doesn't disappear and your employees become unemployed. And that is the group that we help tremendously, because it can feel like such a negative force when you think you've built something great and then you realize you don't know how to give it to someone else. Your kids don't want it, etc. And what we do is we help solve that problem. And really, this goes right in line with what you're discussing about starting something and continuing something is along the same lines. Because there's always going to be the do I really want to do this question that's sitting in our mind. And where we need to start with, and I advise this to everyone and I articulate it in the book, is that you want to come from a spot that is realistic with a shade to optimism. And the reason for that is that if you start in a place that is just pure and utter optimism, you can end up in a place where you see all these opportunities and you believe everything's going to happen, it's going to be perfect. And the first time that something doesn't happen, it can really be a shot to your psyche and your soul and really be discouraging. And likewise, you can't live in pure negativity either and pessimism, because what's going to happen is you'll have no ability or desire to seek the opportunity. The risks of the world will weigh you down and hold you back. And this is why I say you need to live in a space that is realistic with a shade to optimism. Yes, there are reasons that you may want to stop running your business. You may have hit your goal. I want to retire now. I did what I want, and we move on. Well, that's cool. There may be reasons that you don't want to start your business at this point. But what we need to do is discover, really, are these reasons molehills or actually insurmountable obstacles, and how do we go through them, and what is the best decision for me? What is it that I truly want out of the next 5 years of my life? And is this business going to be part of it, whether it be a business I'm going to create or a business that I have already created? Do I want to stay with me? And that's really kind of how I look at how to answer your question that you asked me in the beginning of diving into starting something.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you have incorporated something we talk a lot about on this show, and that is the question, what do you want? I think too often people don't take time to actually think about what is it that you actually want. So that's cool that you're incorporating that into those conversations. Tell us a little bit more about your book.
Yeah. So the book is called Casino Salesmaster: Winning Strategies That Beat the Odds in Sales and Life. At the end of the day, what the book is it's instead of being a dry sales book or marketing book of this is what you do, this is what you do, this is actually how I've applied it in real life. When I was 25, I had just launched my first company, and me living in that space of a much more optimistic mindset than a realistic one, as I just
Uh-huh.
discussed
As we
here.
do in our 20s.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I was in the mindset that the business was going to take off and we're going to have radically awesome sales. And that was whenever we scheduled this trip. And my other three friends had, normal jobs that pay you, biweekly, and their money was never really concerned. I was leveraged to the hilt, and literally only had $500 in my pocket and 250 left on available credit to me. And we were there in Vegas for 3 days, and the book is about how I used sales skills to win in what is one of the most one-sided sales environments in the world, which is a casino floor. It
Mhm.
literally is called the house edge that you have to beat.
Right.
And how I used my sales skills to not just turn that $500 into a complete fantastic trip that they paid me to be there, but how they also were replicatable and implementable in every single person's life. And it goes from the essence of how do you choose your ideal customer? How should you interact with people? What is the mindset that you should have with yourself? Obviously, there's actual tactics in there that I used on the casino floor. And but the amazing part is how much of it is a direct contrast of the sales industry, the way that I teach it and help my clients take over, versus the sales system that most people were brought up with, the 1960s model. And to give you the stark contrast, the 60s model is what many people think of why they don't want to deal with a salesperson. It's you're only getting off this call, you're only walking away from me if me as the salesperson get what I want. Pretty much the definition of destructive relationship, right?
Right.
And it's what led people to want to go to the internet, and that's why the internet exists, right? So I don't have to deal with that negative interaction. Who wants to do that? But what we found after 20 years of Amazon is that people want to have an actual connection and a meaningful relationship when they're buying something that's important to them, not necessarily expensive but important. Well, that same element is true for all of life. And this is what Facebook and TikTok and all the rest of them are running into. People want to have actual connections that go deeper than a 46-second clip. And that is really what we focus on, and how I successfully won in Vegas and repeatedly do. But how this works in life. It's about human connections and how to make them stronger, natural, and not forced. And at the end of the day, that is the essence of what makes anyone successful in this life, whether you really realize it or not. What makes Tom Brady, or made Tom Brady, the most winningest Super Bowl quarterback ever wasn't his ability to throw a football. It was his ability to have everyone on his team going in the same direction. And that was ultimately what made the success. What will make the success of your business is, are you going in the right direction? Yes, sure, there are strategy and tactics. You got to make sure that the ship's pointed in the right direction. It's going to end up somewhere good. But if you don't have the fundamental of everyone wanting to pull in the same direction in a meaningful way, it doesn't matter. You can have the GPS to the middle, the most profitable place on the planet. You'll never get there. So that is really what we discuss and break out in the book there. And like I said, rather than it being a dry story of this is what you do and this is what it is, we actually start with overcoming a casino floor, which is, in my opinion, the most one-sided sales environment you can be in for all obvious reasons.
Yeah. Well, that sounds fascinating, and I think, it probably sounds directed at larger companies. I think that a lot of my audience is just starting out with the idea of starting a business, and you hit on
Mhm.
something when you were describing it that I wanted to dig into deeper, which is how to identify your key client, who your customer is. So, for the people who are listening and maybe they're still at that stage of their business and trying to determine who their customer is, what would your recommendation be?
Well, the joy of this is the sales industry is irrelevant to the size of your business. The way in which we sell and introduce to people is true for all stages, from startup to Ford, who's been around forever. It doesn't really matter. These principles are applicable to all of us because at the end of the day, they're human relations. If all of us are people and all of us need to interact with each other.
That's a really good point though, because I think that people who are just starting out and the idea of starting a business, a lot of people want to avoid the icky sales aspect of their business.
Mhm.
And if you want to make money, you have to sell. So that is a really good point that you made.
Yes, so dealing with the realistic element, every business, regardless of what your actual product is a revenue machine. And it's the bakery that lasts the longest isn't necessarily the one with the best cookies. It's the one that sells the most and has profitability. And that's a fact of life. So to answer your question about how do we use this as a startup situation, it's true regardless of your business size. The first question is, what are we as a company, as an individual? Let's be honest with ourselves and do an evaluation. What are we good with? Well, we're very good at making cookies that have pine nuts in them. Okay, that's awesome. They taste great, but there's obviously some people that aren't going to be able to eat these for obvious reasons. We don't want them to have an allergic reaction. So, okay, how do we then show to people that they shouldn't be afraid of us because we're making amazing things? But if we put up these giant warnings, we're going to make people think that we're making a poison factory here. So, this is a starting point of when we look at the three elements of anyone's revenue cycle. The first part is people have to know, prospects have to know who we are, and they have to have a desire to want to come see us. Most people classify that as marketing. The second most important part, or second phase, once people are at our bakery, do they have the comfortability with us to give us resources, money, in exchange for a promise of the future good? And then part three, delivering on the cookies here. So, what we need to realize, especially with startups, is we live in that space of the operation. I know the great recipe. I know how I'm going to make these cookies fantastic. That's what makes me special and different. Great. You need to obviously have that, and you need to be very familiar with that. But what we then need to do is be able to incorporate it throughout the entire process. Because if our marketing system is run by lawyers, all it's going to be is not allergy this, not allergy that, and you're
Yeah.
not going to get the greatness of your product articulated, and you're just going to get dissolved away, and then you're going to get discouraged because you know you're making something amazing, but there's no one showing up to even ask about it. So it starts with knowing what we are and the genuine facts of it. And then when we get to the actual exchanging of resources for the promise, if you come at it with a pre-made script, and this doesn't matter what you're selling, iron ore or the cookies as we're saying here, if it's a pre-made script, it's not going to work. It'll work for a specific population that had the same personality type of who this script was written for, and that's it. And the reality is it's not how you build life successfully. It's how you make people feel like they're forced in. Because when you're talking to that personality type, cool, awesome. If you're talking to someone who's outside of it, they're going to feel like they're wedged in and they're farther away from it. They're just going to disregard you altogether. So, how do we overcome that core problem? It's doing the same thing you do in every other element of your life. How do you make friends with people that aren't exactly like you personality type wise? Do you have people in your friends that are different than you? The answer is probably yes. Well, how do we go about that? Well, it wasn't with a pre-written script. It was interactions, getting to know them, but starting with honesty about yourself. And when we talk about how to make a sales process, this is a night and day shift from the pressure situation because the goal is actually to make a connection with your customers and your clients. Now, obviously, a business connection is different than a personal connection. I don't want to try to say that you should be blending the two, but that's still the reality. Are we coming from a place where we are making a connection with each other with an exchange that's going to be mutually beneficial for everyone involved? Because at the end of the day, if you don't like my cookies, I shouldn't be forcing them at you because there's going to be someone who does want them and they're going to get more value out of it for me selling to them for the same price. So I would rather give it to the people who are going to get the maximum joy from it than try to force it to you who doesn't want them. Because the way life is, we can only make so many of them. Might as well give it to the people who are going to get the most out of it and make life better. And then that just creates a ripple effect that really becomes unimaginable once you really go through it. But it all starts from embracing human connections and making better relationships.
Yeah, and I think you're hitting on what I know to be true about making sales in any business, which is you need to first know who they are, then you want to like them enough to pay attention, and then you want to trust them enough to pay them. And it's this whole know like trust process that you're just talking through, which is I think what a lot of entrepreneurs, especially when they're starting out, kind of forget how to build
Mhm.
into their sales process. And really it is about building connection and building trust with your audience. So I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not easy to build a business here. Just going through the three funnels of the revenue cycle: marketing, sales, and operations. None of us have a personality because it does not exist that can do all three of them successfully.
Yes.
In reality, you have one that you are drawn towards the most and you will be great at. You have one that you kind of will do because you have to, and you
Yes.
have one that you're going to push off forever.
Yes.
And what you really realize need to do, and this can be very challenging for a startup when you're limited in the initial capital, is you need to say, I'm being honest, I'm not good at that one. I
Yep.
don't want to do it. So how can I find a solution that can happen? And in the beginning, it's normally great to find other companies that specialize in that and
Yep.
then do your partnerships with it. And whether that be a directly thing within this revenue cycle or if it's something that's a legality problem that you just have to do. Because there's a lot of business owners, and I know this because I work with so many of you, that hate doing tax work. So you're never going to do your payroll tax correctly.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You get sued once, there goes your business.
Yep.
It's much better to just hire some company that actually does like it because believe me, it's weird, but there are
There
people out there
are
who
people
like
out
doing
there who
payroll.
actually like it.
Yeah,
It's
and then
not
just
me.
hire them to do it. It's a fact of life, and it doesn't matter what the industry is. There are some people that are never going to want to do marketing. Well, at the end of the day, if the clients don't know who we are, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
But there's companies out there that can do this for us in a great way. There's companies that can do it digitally. There's companies that will do it in person for us at literal sales events. And I have partnered with vast array of these companies throughout the years, and that's just the examples I'm coming off of the people that I use myself because that's how you grow. What you are best at, making the cookies, focus your time at because it probably gives you the
Yeah.
most joy anyway.
Well,
And
yeah,
what
that's a good
burns
point.
yeah, and what burns the business owners out is doing stuff that's not giving you joy, and it really doesn't even matter how profitable the entity is. If you're stuck doing a part of your business that you don't like doing, it's gonna burn you out, and you're just not gonna want to do it anymore. And that's human nature. There's nothing wrong or evil about that. That's life. And you're much better off just saying, I'm going to find someone who's going to do this. And then in that connection, have it an ability to grow with you as you expand. And then, like I said, that's really how, as a business start, you need to recognize that in your realistic, honest assessment of yourself. You know, I don't like being in front of strangers and talking, or I love being in front of strangers and groups. I hate sitting behind a desk and making sure that this happens or that happens. And you just got to know yourself and be honest with yourself. And there's a puzzle piece for you in any business. Just where do I fit and where do I want to be? And then that's just how you make it. You have to be honest.
Yeah, and I think that you're touching on this aspect of self-awareness that we talk a lot about here on this show because we do a lot of self-discovery conversations. So we do a lot of kind of looking back, noticing patterns. What are our lessons? So that we're better preparing ourselves to be the best version of ourselves moving forward. But for you specifically, when you look back at your journey through entrepreneurship, what do you think inspires you most about your story?
What I think it was when I did the self discovery, is what you just answered right there, or what you just said. For me, it was of the three funnels, I know I can do the sales. And once you're able to do the sales, the operation part of what I was selling, it didn't matter because I found in college that I literally sold what, four different companies for each of the 4 years there. And I was equally successful at all of them. Now, granted, being a salesman, especially a commission only one, has its own challenges. And I
Hmm.
devote a chapter to the book about this because it is something that's incredibly hard.
Hmm.
But being in sales or creating your own business, because they both end up being the same thing, is one of the greatest joys of being in a free American society that we have that most people will never recognize. Because it doesn't matter what your starting point was, every single business in the world needs the sales industry to be successful, or the business does not exist. So, therefore, once you have this skill set, you essentially are never going to be unemployed because you are needed everywhere. You've created the most universal skill to businesses. And then it became, well, who do I want to do it for? And as you said, when we're in our 20s, we don't always make the best decisions. And I kind of wandered around from place to place, and I learned a lot of the this is not how you do it approach. Like when I'm in charge of it, I'll never do it this way, this way, this way. And eventually, when I was 25, I just came to the conclusion I don't want to be here anymore. The money was fine. The first year I was the underclassman of the year. The second year I was, correction, the first year I was rookie of the year. Second year I was underclassman of the year. Third year I left. And the simple fact was, it just, I didn't want to be there anymore. And once I realized I was going to be a free agent, I wanted to go and see if I create my own product. In that process, I realized that was when I truly learned I don't like doing the operations as much as I should, at least for those first ways. I outsourced them. It was in real estate, so I outsourced to people who knew how to fix up the buildings, which really was the beginning of how do you scale and how do you grow a business successfully. Because I knew I didn't want to be hanging drywall. I didn't want to be on a roof. But I found people who did want to do that and were good at it. And then next thing you know, boom, we had a little housing empire going on here until the governor said I was irrelevant and not essential, and I did not take that well
Yeah.
at all at the beginning of COVID, and kind of led a personal mission of, well, let's survive and prove it to him that we are relevant, and that's how I started helping other businesses, and how I've basically found Elite Business Conversations was never really the intent, but it was a great byproduct. I have much more joy knowing that I am saving people's jobs than I ever did making houses. And that's why we're at here now with Elite Business Conversations. And that's really the journey that came from one spark when I was 18 in someone's kitchen, learning that I know how to sell knives in a sales system that I knew at the time, despite I was good at it, was the wrong way to do it. So I started from this 1960s model and learn it inside and out, all of its problems in multiple different pit stops. And now I've created a much better and use a much better system than ever imaginable. It's all based upon human connections and relating to people.
Yeah, and you're hitting on a few things that I think are really commendable. So, the fact that you could pivot in those times, COVID times, and figure out how to take what you are good at and use that to benefit others. These are the types of stories we highlight over and over again here on this podcast because it really is showing people that regardless of what the situation is that you're looking at, there is another way to approach it. And in a lot of cases, a more profitable one.
Hmm.
So being able to know your value and how that applies to multiple industries or multiple companies is really kind of cool. I love to see that over and over again in these stories. So we talked a little bit about kind of your journey to get there, and we also spent a lot of time and talking about our lessons that we've learned. And so if you think back to all of the different lessons that you've learned along this journey, what do you think is the common theme in them?
So there's a lot of them. I think to dive into, I think the most applicable one is you need to be, as I said many times, you need to be true to yourself, and I think that's part of why I wanted to be on the show because I love that it has a theme of yours. But you also need to realize that there's going to be times that it didn't work, and that's okay. That we went out, we thought that this was going to be a good idea, that this risk was going to work out, and it didn't. There's you don't know everything about the situation. That's why it's called a risk, and you get better at being honest, turning off some of that haze of optimism to look at what is the real situation here. And I think that the important part was learning from the mistakes and not taking them personal. And I think that that was the key difference to realize that, yes, there's obviously a personal loss here because we're not making the profit on this venture that we thought we would have. That's a fact of life. But that does not make me as an individual a bad person. It means that we took a risk, it didn't work out. That's part of life. I mean, we do this with any single thought that we have. I chose Coke instead of Pepsi. Well, maybe Pepsi would have gone better with that drink combination for the first time. You didn't know. So maybe it was Coke. Well, now we found out. That's why America does Jack and Coke instead of Jack and Pepsi, because we've learned. There were some people out there who started with Pepsi. So when we look at this and say, even
Listen, that's
minor
a good
choices
point.
like this,
I don't know that I've ever heard someone say, "I'd like a Jack and Pepsi, please." Like
exactly. But there's someone in a frat house right now trying it. And they're going to find out and learn. That doesn't make you a bad person. Same is true with business. I thought that if we came out with the super cherry bread that's loaded with chunks of cherry and that the people would love it. Well, it wasn't the best Valentine's seller we have ever had. That doesn't, again, it's not taking things personal and keeping them in appropriate perspective. And from this really came four different values that I think have common. Really, once I implemented these, they have made life and business better. And really, for any person I've ever talked to, and if I go too long on this is one thing I definitely want to make sure you stop me on.
no, no, no. Give us the 4 things. We're here for it.
Okay, so the base of the four skills or values, whatever you want to call them, to implement into your life very quickly are prudence, humility, courage, and justice. And what they mean in the business context here is prudence is always being open to learning more about specifically what gives you fascination and desire, because that's what you'll be best at, because that's your passion, but also things that are slightly adjacent to it. And that's how we find other avenues that we think are fun and good. And then in terms of humility, it's realizing that I am neither the biggest and most important person on this planet, nor am I small and insignificant. And where do I fall upon that line? Humility, really, at the end of the day, is the guiding force between the realism and optimism spectrum. And we really break that down in a deeper level. And that's very important. Courage is the ability that says, when I feel something inside of me, do I figure out how to get it out? Even if it comes out weird or stuttery or awkward, do I figure out a way to articulate it and describe it? And likewise, when someone shares something at me, do I receive it in a way that is correct? Or do I explode like a crazy person and, make bad results? Or am I receptive, understanding, and at least able to listen? Some people call that open mindedness as well. And then the final one here is justice. And this is not like going to a courtroom style justice. This is, am I creating a connection for genuine reasons? Am I hiring this person because they are the best person for the resources I want to spend on the position? Or am I hiring them because it clicks a box and it will look good in a company email or a picture? Because if it's the second way, you will never have a successful life. In the personal world, am I trying to be with this person for some type of rub off clout, or do I actually want to make a good connection with them? And we see that in a personal world. That guy's just trying to use someone, he's fake or whatever, versus, oh, you should actually spend time with them. That's good. And it's very, when we see it, it's obvious. But to actually instill these four things into your life really are the gateway of pretty much unmeasurable explosion and growth in every facet that will matter to you.
Well, I love it. Thank you for sharing those 4 things. You know, when you first said the 4 names, I was like, interesting. I don't know if I would," but then you described them and I'm like, "Okay, yes, I could get behind all of that." And this may be part of the answer to this next question, but
Mhm.
I like to ask people, like, think back to the younger you, whatever phase that is, and if you could go back and give that younger Joe advice, what would you tell him?
Well, I guess the first thing is I would tell myself it's going to work. I think that there's always an important element because no matter where you're at in your journey of life, there's going to be a moment when you're willing to quit. And if you know it's going to work, it's a lot easier to get through the process. I think that that's a very important thing to know, regardless of which problem we're thinking about in our own lives from our younger. If we know it's going to work out by going through this decision, it's something that there's a whole lot less anxiety about in the process of making the decision. Because that's one of the things that, as good or bad as our human brain is, emotions drive us, but we have a very, very bad way of recalling the emotions in the moment when we were making a decision. We think about the after effect of how they came from, but to be in that anxiety or stress or whatever the case is in a moment of deep decision, our minds don't really remember that in retrospect. Good emotions or negative, like the joy
Yeah,
that we have when we first met someone. And I think that just knowing outright that it would work is something that's incredibly important. And then obviously the four values I just gave you as well to
yeah,
fully go all in and strengthen them because those are ultimately the tools that you use to fix any solution.
yeah. No, I like it. And you've hit on this a few times, but there's such value in the things that don't work out, the
Mhm,
mistakes or the failures or whatever, however you want to categorize them. When we take a risk, sometimes it doesn't work out. And to realize that there actually is value in those instances as well. I think if people kind of knew that going into it as the younger versions, we would probably take more risks. We would be a little more courageous in the things that we're willing to attempt or try, knowing that whether it works out or not, you're going to get value from the experience.
mhm. Yeah, that's exactly true because there's certainly a lot of, is this going to be worth it? And
Yeah,
am I going to get anything out of it? And those are human nature questions. That doesn't make you a bad person for wanting to get something out of a situation.
yeah,
It's you're literally built to have a survival instinct for that purpose. So knowing that there's risks, most of us overemphasize, and it's been proven scientific study again and again, that the fear of losing out, losing something we already have, is greater than the possibility of gain for an exorbitantly more amount. And when you look at it from an accounting perspective, it goes, well, that's really stupid. You should always just try to
yes,
get the one that's more because it's going to work
yes.
out. And life does work that way. Taking the risk, do I go over and talk to this person? Do I try to apply for this job even though it says it needs something that I don't have? Um, you know,
Oh my gosh,
for
yes.
those who've written job applications, you're putting some of that in there just because a lawyer told you to, and you don't really need it. It's not really relevant. Like
Oh my
5 years
gosh,
experience at
yes.
whatever, I just care you can do the job.
Like, I can't even tell you how many people need to hear that right now. I have tried to coach people through apply anyways. What they
Mhm,
put in the job application is their best case scenario wish list. Like, if they find somebody who meets every single one of those, this is the unicorn they are looking for. Otherwise, they're looking for the best person who can do most of that right now.
mhm.
Yeah.
Not right now. That's always. It doesn't matter what the economy
Yeah.
is at in any capacity. And that's a fact. Obviously, do not lie. If you lie, you are automatically like screwed by 6 federal
Yes.
laws. So do
Yes.
not lie. But also, don't hold yourself back.
Exactly.
Just say and the joy, especially if you're applying online, not to go down this whole tangent, pre-write the answers. Every company basically has the same law firm telling you the questions. Just pre-write the answers and know them.
Yeah.
And that way, that's what I always tell people. It doesn't matter what stage you're in life, whether you're 16 trying to get your first job or you're
Yep.
65 trying to do a retirement job. Go for the thing that you think will give you the most joy. And likewise,
Yes.
when you're in the interview, if you don't feel that you want to be there a year from now, don't be there for a day. And don't
Oh
have,
my gosh, that's such good advice.
yeah.
That is such good advice. I try to remind people that when you're in the interview process, this is a two-way connection you're looking for.
Mhm,
You are trying to decide if you want to work there just as much as they're trying to decide if you're the right person. So it's
mhm.
not this whole please pick me, please pick me. It's no, I need you to tell me more and do I want to be here? Let's continue the conversation. It's also how I tell people they should approach dating is you're trying to make a connection and see if you want to even have another conversation with this person. And that's it. You're just trying to see, do we vibe? Do we not vibe? And that totally goes for job interviews.
Just take likewise with a dating situation. Which group of person is more likely to have negative outcomes? The one who is just saying, anyone please pick me, I'll do whatever, just pick me, or the one who's actually trying to find someone that's an equal connection?
Yep.
And then the same is true for the business. The business wants to have someone that's going to be a great connection rather than someone who's just going to not be able to do what they want. So at the end of the day, if you don't have the 20 years job experience, it doesn't mean you shouldn't try.
Yep.
You can look around at all kinds of different examples. Like you just take general managers of NFL teams. It used to be you have to have 30 years experience, you have to work your ways up the ranks. And now if we look at the NFL, there are 7 of them that are younger than 40. Well, that means they didn't have 30 years of experience. It's pretty straightforward. So at the end of the day, it's did you make a connection with the person across from you?
Yep.
And at the end of the day, if they want you, they'll figure it out on their side. And if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean that you yourself are insignificant or invaluable. It just means that you aren't the fit that they want.
Yes.
We see it on car lots. I can settle for this SUV, but I want the truck. And can I talk that guy down to make it so that we can make a connection where I end up with this truck, rather than taking this car home? You've seen it all kinds of different things, and you're right. Don't have the fear that just because it was written out as a goal from the company that you should discount us. Because the other part is that guy who does hit all those wish lists is probably applying to a job that's 2 levels higher anyway, and they know they're never going to get them.
Yes.
So that's a fact of life.
That is an excellent point. That is so true. Well, okay, so my next question is, when you look forward and you try to decide what's next for you, what do you now believe is possible for your own life?
Well, I mean, I did this study, or not exercise, I guess is the better way to say it. Whenever I do it once a year, I do it normally in January. And it's basically you write out on a timeline how long do you think you're going to live? And the way that they do it is whichever gender you are, when did your parent die at that age? Or grandparent, depending on how old you are. And then you just have a timeline there and you say, where are you right now in your life? Boom. And for some people, it's like, oh, there's not a lot left. So it
Mhm.
really puts a perspective in there of what am I going to get done? And then more importantly, if it's a big, far down the road goal, how do I get there? And how do we build those stepping stools in between? And I know for me that I have, and this might be my personality, constantly creating new businesses. It's how you get to 18 of them. You just keep having ideas and wanting to make more. I have probably about 14 more businesses that I know I want to create in areas that I have never been before. I want to create one of the greatest video games of all time. I have it in my head about how I want it to be. I have never written a line of code in my life. So,
I love it.
but I still want to make this happen and figure out how to do it. I want to create the world's greatest indoor water park. I will build a hotel around it, but I want to build that because I live in Pittsburgh and way more than half of the year, it's not okay to be outside in a water park because you're going to be freezing. So that's
Yep.
a fact of life. So these are things that I have in my head that I want to build and create. And then it's just how do you build the stepping stones to get there and make it happen? Um, so So there's a long list, but the sufficient to say is that I do want to have the hotel water park, and I do want to create the video game because, unfortunately, for better or worse, I think that might be the best way to affect the culture at this point, for America.
I mean, it's a little overlooked if you ask me.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I love that. Well, okay. So, my last question for you is how can people find you?
So there's two ways to reach out to me and find me here. The first is going to be if you go to my website, Elite Business Conversations, and you mentioned that you heard me here on Start Again, instead of giving you the traditional 15-minute consultation for a conversation, I'll make it a 30-minute. So just make sure you put it in the notes for creating the meeting that heard us here. And the second way that you can find me is on LinkedIn. I'm Joe Rockey Jr. If you go to me there and you connect and you send me the message again that we met here on Start Again, I'll give you a discount code for the book, which will be able to tell you so many things that we didn't discuss here. I mean, it's a 9-hour audiobook basically. So it will be able to give you so much great detail about how to make connections, how to make a sales system within yourself that you're comfortable and confident in, and how to really make it replicatable in all the elements of your life. So those are the two best ways: Elite Business Conversations or connect with me on LinkedIn. In both cases, mention that this is where you heard me, and that's the best ways to connect. Is it okay if I ask you a question?
Sure.
As a host, I get a lot of guests don't do that, so it's kind of weird. That's why I always check up front. So obviously, we talked about a lot of stuff here today. Was there anything that kind of stood out to you as something that was meaningful and impactful?
I think every conversation is meaningful and impactful. I think if I were to kind of look at the theme of our conversation, what came out more and more often, for me, it was I would love to highlight for people it's worth it to take the risk. And so I think you are an excellent example of it doesn't always work out, but you still get value from it and it's worth the risk when you take it. So I think you're an excellent example of risk taking and how worthwhile of an adventure it is. So I think that's what stood out to me.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Well, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Like I said, it was a great show, and I appreciate being on it, and I really am honored to be the first guy you had here on your show.
Hooray. Did you like this episode or did you love it? Inquiring minds want to know. The best way to support this show is to subscribe and leave a review. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.